Hi again, here we are to continue building classes for our Breakout game. In the last video, we created a bricks class and a paddle class. And in this video, we just have 3 more classes to create: the score, the lives, and the game. And then we're going to dig a little deeper into object-oriented programming and classes with inheritance. So first of all, let's get through the score and the lives class. So I'll set up score, and I'll give it a constructor, right, and a render method. So we're following like the same pattern for all the classes. And then our render method will take the CTX as a parameter. And you know what? The lives class is going to do the same thing. Okay, so now I have a class where I can make an object that will represent the score. Let's think about the score for a minute. So the score could have an X and a Y. You know, we need to position it on the screen. It could have a color and an initial value, right? You know, like maybe if the score starts at like 500 or 0 or -3 or something, we could set that in. Why don't we just set the score to an initial value of 0? So I'm going to give the score these parameters that I passed in here. So it'll take the X and the Y, and then it will also use the color. And then the score will have a property called score, which is, you know, it'll be a little weird, score.score. Maybe we'll say score.value. And the value of the score class will be the number that we display, like, you know, 500 points or something. And we'll give it an initial value of 0. Okay? And actually, the lives class will work almost exactly the same way, right? So actually, these could almost be the same class. So what if we had a class called GameLabel, right? And we could make a score GameLabel or a lives GameLabel. So why don't we do that? I'm going to change this. So let me move this up here, right? Because this is the beauty of creating classes, right? Is we create a class and we can make as many objects from that class, as many instances of an object from the class, and they'll all be the same but unique, right? So in other words, I can make 2 game labels, one called score, one called lives, but they can have a different color, they can have a different X and Y, they can keep track of a different value, okay? So here we are, we have this, right? So now let's go find the draw score and draw lives. So if we look at this right here, you can see that these are actually, you know, almost exactly the same. The only thing that's different is the position, right? So the score takes the text that you want to draw, or fill text actually takes the text that you want to draw, and then it takes an X and a Y position, and the only thing that is different is here. But our class will store its X and Y, so it can plug in its numbers here and here, right? So let's borrow these things, right? I'll copy those and move them into the render method for our GameLabel class, right? And the font will be the same. And actually, you know what we could do is, why don't we do this? Why don't we make a property called font, and then we'll give it this as a default value, right? And then we can say this dot font equals the font value that we set. And now down here we can say, you know, this dot font, you know, and then if you want to change the font, you can pass that in as a parameter, right? The fill style will be this dot color. And then actually, you know, we need to make sure that the text here can be unique for each one. So let's do a couple more changes, and then we'll put this value in here, right? So instead of score here, we'll say this dot value, and then for the x, it'll be this dot x, and for the y, it'll be this dot y. Okay, so we have that for the game label, it'll be x and y. And actually, this is pretty good right here. They have a good system. You put the text in first, followed by the x and the y. Maybe this class should take in the text that you display as the first parameter, like this, right? And then, you can assign it a label that it displays, followed by the value that it holds, right? So, and we could rearrange this in another way too. It might be a little more better, or it might be better to have just a generic, game label that only displays the text, and then something outside like the game keeps track of the score. But the way that this was set up originally, we'll just kind of follow their system. So now what we want to do is we want to have the text to display in front of the value. So I'll get rid of the text for score here and use the $sign and the curly braces and say this dot text. So now the game label always displays the text message followed by the value, okay? And then it puts it at the x and y position, right? So I think that looks pretty good. So now how are we going to make a new instance of game label? So let's make an object here. We'll say const score. Actually, let's say score label to make it like really clear, right? Because before score was the number, but now this is an object with some properties and it also has the value in it, right? So let's call it score label, and then we'll make a new instance of score. So now I need the message, and if you recall, the score showed a message that looked like this, and then we'll need the x and the y. And shoot, I got rid of the value. I forget. I think the x was like 20 or 30, and then the y was like 20 or 30, something like that, right? I think if we look at the oh yeah, actually I just left it here. So it was 8 and 20. So we can just take, because essentially we're going to, initialize the x and y with these same values that we had put in there before. So let's put these here, and then let's make an instance of lives label. So we'll make a new score. Oops, actually I made a mistake there. This should have been score label, right? So or game label, my mistake, right? So this should be game label, and then the lives label will be, it'll say lives, colon, and then let me get the position from the old method. So if I say draw lives, it'll be canvas width 65 or minus 65 and, y of 20. So we'll borrow that and we'll put that in here, right? And so, pardon me, another thing that we could do here is the text object also has an alignment property. So actually it might be nice to align the lives label, since it's on the right side of the screen. If we aligned right, it might look better, right? But anyway, we'll tackle that later, and we could make that a property that we pass into the game label. So we say like what the text is, it's x and y, and then it's font, and then it has an optional alignment property, right? So we'll add that in later. Now that we've made this change, though, we need to use these two new classes, right? So now remember, they have a value that they display next to the next to their message, right, or their text, right? So we have to keep that in mind, right? So we're no longer using these two variables. So let's get rid of those. We're gonna have to do some rearranging of the code here to make it make more sense, but let's get this working and then we'll come back to it, right? So looking at collision detection, you can see that the score changes here. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this so that it's score label dot value plus equals 1. So we just did the same thing we did here, except now we're setting the value within the score label object. So we can get rid of that. And then if score, well, it's no longer score, it's going to be score label dot value. If it's equal to the brick count times the brick column count. Actually, you know what? These should probably be bricks.column. Maybe not though, I don't know, because we were using the same values, but maybe I'm going to change this to this, right? And now let's go get the rest of these score things. So these two guys can go now. We're no longer needing those two functions. And actually this, we should deal with that later too. We got our move paddle here, collision. Oh yeah, so here is where you could lose a life, right? So if I go down to lives here, actually this is going to be lives label dot value minus equals 1. So we can get rid of that. And then let's just, this not lives is a little weird. I think I'm going to say like if lives label value equals 0, right? Or you could even say if it's, you know, less than 1. Okay, so to me this reads a little better than that other one, right? Because I know that it's a count and it's a number, right? Then that's game over, right? And then let's go down to draw. So we no longer have these two methods, right? So we'll replace those with score label dot render. We'll pass in our dependency, and then we'll do lives. Lives label dot render like this, and then we no longer need these two guys, right? And so that's looking pretty good. This collision detection is kind of weird. Someone should kind of own that. We're going to get into that later. I think this is probably going to belong to the game class when we write it. Okay, so we've got all this. I think that looks pretty good. Let's give it a test, right? We might have missed something. So we should go to the browser here. Oh, it looks like it's still working. Oh, wait. You know what? The initial value for lives, my score is working, but lives is 0. So, so the lives should start at 3, right? So probably we should go up here, find the lives class, right? And right up here, right? Or the game label, right? And what I want to do is I want the lives label to have a value, an initial value of 3. So, you know, if everybody usually starts off with a value of 0, but in the case of lives label, we'll give it, you know, right after we create it, we'll assign it a value of 3. Let's give that a test here. Oh yeah, there we go. Let's see if we can lose a life. Oh, it goes down to 2. Let's see if we can just lose the game. Right, so there's 2 lives. And then, oh, game over. So everything's working. Great. So I'll call this video here. And then in the next video, we'll wrap up the game class and then we'll move into inheritance. Now, the one thing that I'd like you to do here is if you go through your code, remember how we rearranged the code here so it was more organized, like we put all the DOM references, we made all the variables. I just rearranged everything and added these new classes in here, and so now like my code really needs some organization and some comments to clean it up. So I'm going to do that in the next video. And you can try that on your own, see what you come up with to organize your code. So thanks for watching, and then I'll see you next time.